Hello, Stanford community. Welcome to September's Stanford Cares monthly community health talk. I'm Malathi Srinivasan. I'm the clinical professor here at Stanford and associate director for our Center for Asian Healthcare Research and Education. And it's my pleasure today to introduce and welcome Dr. Minal Moharir to give a talk on how Nourish is giving Asian tools to eat well and live life well. This is going to be a phenomenal talk. We've had over 300 registrants today, so one of our best attended pre-registration. We're sure that there will be more of you streaming in. And before I introduce her, I also want to make a plug for our October talk, which is going to be on sight-threatening diseases for the Asian community with Dr. Albert Wu. So that will also be on a Tuesday in October coming up soon. So we're excited about that as well. So I know all of you are interested in your health, which is why you're here today. But did you know that over 50% of Asians in the United States are either diabetic or pre-diabetic? And despite the high prevalence of diabetes in the AAPI community, there's really a scarcity of Asian-specific nutrition resources, especially for the diverse array of Asian ethnicities. And we know that Asians are 60% of the world's population and 5 to 6% of the US population and 30% of the Bay Area's population. And yet diabetes and prediabetes are so prevalent. So knowing how to eat and what to eat without having to abandon our traditional foods is really essential if we hope to reduce diabetes in our community, especially if you are like my family and other families that are very rice and chapati and dosa or other wonderfully high carbohydrate food heavy. Now, to address this issue, Dr. Minal Moharir and her team here at Stanford Nourish have taken on the monumental task of producing nutrition education resources, especially for the Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Indian, and Korean communities. Now, under Nourish's guidance with our registered dietitian, Phan, the Nourish interns combined their talents for science and online content creation. The basis of their content is simple: reduce refined carbohydrates, promote balanced meals, and maintain taste, texture, and familiarity with the foods that we love. And this is remarkable because in 1 year from inception, Nourish has built a community of over 5,000 online users partnered with UC Irvine's Institute for the Future of Health and Health Unity to design a groundbreaking food database and mobile application, contributed to Stanford Healthcare's cardiovascular health food for heart campaign, health food for heart campaign. They've written cookbooks, collaborated with outstanding chefs, two of whom are here today, produced popular cooking videos, started to expand into online retail, and so much more. So in this community health talk, Dr. Minal Moharir is going to discuss Nourish's rapid growth trajectory, impact, and all of the cultural and scientific considerations that go into this. Now, Dr. Moharir is Director of Nutrition at Stanford CARE, the Center for Asian Health Research and Education. She was born and raised in Nashik, India, where she completed her formal medical education. She then did her medical internal medicine residency at New York Downtown Hospital in New York City. And she currently practices clinical occupational medicine at Stanford's Occupational Health Center. She's extremely passionate about preventive medicine, health and wellness, and identifying health and safety issues on campus to prevent employee and illness and injury. But her work with Nourish is groundbreaking. And I'm so pleased to welcome her today. And so please join me in giving her a rousing round of applause, along with our dietitian, Lily, and our two phenomenal chefs, Dama and Fu. And over to you.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Srinivasan. Tonight, I would like to take you along with me on the Nourish project journey. But before we begin, I would like to take a moment and thank all of you for taking time from your busy schedule and joining us at this community talk. I especially want to thank Dr. Palaniappan, Dr. Lin, the CARE team, our panelists, Doris, Kristen, and Angela. One more thing, whatever you were doing 5 to 10 minutes ago, I would like you to go through this small breathing exercise. so everyone can feel a little bit more settled and participate in this journey. You're going to begin with the breathing in and breathing out twice. Let's begin. Breathe in and out. And once more, breathe in and out. Great. Let's get started. This talk is for educational and informational purposes only. This talk is not intended to be substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment. I would like to start my own story, which led me to the start of Nourish project. Growing up every day, I looked forward to going to the local vegetable market with my mom and enjoying the fresh food she made with love. Every evening, she would bring back the fresh vegetables and we could enjoy all those meals as a family. I recall my plate being filled with colorful, fresh, just rightly spiced vegetables like okra, cauliflower, eggplant. I can still taste her homemade rotis and fresh snacks she made for school. Maintaining my weight by eating all of this homemade food was really mindless. I never even thought about it. So then fast forward a few years later, after completing my medical school, I came to the US. I'll never forget going to the grocery store the first time I came over here. I was amazed with all the different kinds of packaging, the variety of food. I started going to the grocery store almost every week. I just had to try all the different flavors and offerings. And who knew there were so many different types of bread, drinks, so colorful, chips, yogurt, and peanut butter. What was peanut butter? I did not know it. And there were so many varieties. Everything was so colorful. I just had to try it all and my taste buds were full of joy. Well, wanting to try everything, 2 years later, you can imagine I had gained 10 pounds. What should I do? I started really reflecting on my weight and how that was affecting my health and well-being. I noticed that in last 2 years, I was consuming highly processed foods, neglecting the foods I grew up eating, and had forgotten what it meant to eat simple, healthy food. So before I go too much further, I have a quick exercise that you can join in. We are going to have a little fun because I know I'm not the only one who has often found it very hard to make a healthy choice when it comes to food we love. Most of you may be familiar with word clouds. So we are going to have some fun, and I invite you to share your thoughts with me. What I want you to do is on your phone or another browser, go to menti.com. And once it's open, type in this 8-digit code. We will just take a few seconds here for everyone to open the site and type in the code. I'll give you a couple minutes over here. Once you type in the 8-digit code, this question will pop up, which is, what is the hardest part of eating healthily? What we want to do is to type in one word that for you is the answer to this question. And as you type in your answers, you can type in up to one answer, or you can type in up to 4 answers or 5. We'll see the word cloud grow. As you see, I'm looking at this word cloud grow and looking at what is, if anything surprises me, or is this mostly as I expected or as you all expected? This is great. Look at everybody who chose time, cost, access, hard. So as you see, it's pretty difficult to when it comes to choosing food. So for instance, when my dad was diagnosed with diabetes, I did what all of us do. I Googled it. I was really looking for diabetic friendly recipes. There were multiple websites with diabetes recipes, but most of them had very few Asian recipes. There were the one of the example, which is very, very striking, was the world-renowned Mayo Clinic. I was surprised to see only very few recipes on their extensive list were related to Asian culture. As you may know, diabetes is a growing problem for all of us. According to the CDC, 9.2% of Asian Americans have been formally diagnosed with diabetes. Notice how the CDC data is age adjusted. This means differences in the age distribution between the races are not the main cause for disparity in diabetes rates. While the statistic is striking on its own when compared to non-Hispanic white population in the US, aggregating Asians into one category really masks the health disparities present within Asian subgroups. As you can see, Asian Indians and Filipinos have very high rates of diagnosed diabetes compared to those of Chinese origin. However, this isn't the end of the story. Up until now, we have been talking about Asians who have been formally diagnosed with diabetes. The CDC estimates nearly 17% of all Asian Americans have type 2 diabetes. This includes those who have yet to receive diagnosis. Isn't that astounding? To go even further, let's talk about prediabetes. The CDC estimates about that 39.2% of all Asian Americans are pre-diabetic. Taking into account all of the information I have shared with you, over 50% of Asians in the United States are estimated to be diabetic or pre-diabetic. All these stories, figures, and statistics remind my team that bringing nutrition education to Asian Americans is necessary, impactful, and timely. This is why we started the Nourish project. I wanted to create culturally tailored resources that help Asians to effectively prevent and manage diabetes. Basically, the Nourish project provides simple ingredient adjustments and recipes for the food we already love. Despite higher rates of diabetes in Asian populations, Asian representation in the nutrition and healthcare is lacking, and we are going to change that. Because of this problem is so pervasive, I knew I needed a large and a diverse team. So we are physicians. Dr. Palaniappan, Dr. Lin are the co-founders of Stanford Center for Asian Health Research and Education and the hosts of this project. Dr. Gautam is family medicine physician and director for integrated medicine for care. Lily is the head registered dietitian for Nourish. Anuja, our registered dietitian, is based in India and represents Indian cuisine and helps create Indian-specific content. Our interns are our bread and butter and the backbone of this project. Our interns are the idea powerhouses for Nourish. They are located all over the country and sometimes even the world, but that does not stop them from putting out outstandingly creative content. By bringing on undergraduate and graduate interns to my Nourish project, my goal was to help educate next generation healthcare professionals and make sure that these interns immediately start sharing this knowledge with their loved ones. They created a recipe for this program. They hand-selected the recipes that went into the cookbook and attached the stories that go with them. They also do our social media, content creation, graphic designing, marketing. They do it all. Next, we have two world-class chefs, Chef Irfan Dama and Chef 2 David Fu, who you'll hear from later in this talk. We have other world-renowned scientists who have also joined our project. Jia Li, she is the Director for Health Unity, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to generate new health insights by integrating separate data silos related to user-generated health data. Ramesh Jain, Director of UC Irvine Institute for Future Health and World Food Atlas team. We work with international organizations such as the Obama Foundation to show them importance of cultural relevance and health equity. We work with Arogya World, which is a global health nonprofit organization working to prevent non-communicable diseases, heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease throughout health education and lifestyle change. And also on more of a personal scale, we have currently reached more than 4,000 online users who are excited to learn more about Asian culture, identity, and nutrition. As you've all heard the expression, it takes a village. Well, we are a highly functioning village of all the indispensable people that you see on the screen. And we are just getting started. Right now, our primary focus is on 6 major Asian groups in the United States. But our goal is to use our experience to broaden our scope in the future. With these cuisines and cultures in mind, we develop recipes that follow American Diabetic and American Heart Association guidelines. We develop these recipes not only to be healthy, but also to be simple and delicious. This is the most important part what we do at Nourish. Later in this talk, we will do a deeper dive into our recipe development process. To bring our recipes to life, we create a variety of content. Cooking videos, as you see on the right-hand side, are well liked by our audience. The exciting aspect of these videos is they are translated into culturally relevant languages, so we can ensure that we are reaching our target audience in their native languages. For instance, this video has been translated to Chinese. This video has been translated to Vietnamese. Another purpose these videos serve is to communicate complex and nuanced information in a fun way to our audience. These are a little bit deeper dives into various important topics. For example, this video focuses on the differences between brown rice and white rice, which is a very confusing but very important topic for many. These videos are made by our interns and they're really top-notch. As I mentioned earlier, at our core, we are recipe developers. Think about it. Our goal is to teach people how to eat their favorite foods in a way that they don't spike the blood sugar. How? Through simple ingredient substitutions or simple substitutions, portion adjustments, and strategic meal pairings. All of these methods require well-written recipes and guidance. That's why a registered dietitian, Lily, is vital to Nourish. Lily is Nourish's lead registered dietitian, and she oversees all of the work put together by our interns. She is also heavily involved in Nourish's online presence and direction. Thank you, Lily. Take it away.
Thank you, everybody. And, welcome. I'm so touched that you are spending your beautiful Tuesday night here with us instead of having dinner with your family. So I can see that you deeply care about this topic. And like many of us here, I came upon this topic because my father was diagnosed with diabetes and ultimately renal failure many years ago. And, I didn't know what to do those decades ago. So I went back to, I quit my tech job and I went back to school to become a dietitian. That took me 5 years of being a Brooks student again. And the things that I want to share are essentially the things that I wish I had known 20 years ago. I wish I had known so that, perhaps I could have helped out my family a little bit more. And the things that I'm sharing right now as well are the things that I want to share all the time. And because I'm a clinical dietitian, I work in a hospital. And for example, I come in and I see a young Indian engineer in his 30s, and he just got brand new diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, blood glucose over 800 milligram per deciliter. And he was very confused and he was asking me what to eat. But in the hospital, we don't have a lot of resources for Indian folks, right? So then it get me thinking of how we're going to create very simple but tasteful recipes to use that is applicable. So I'm going to share with you a few simple ideas today. If you can go to the next slide, please. Please keep in mind that everybody has a different needs. So, feel free to ask more questions about it and talk to your doctors. Next slide, please. I won't get into the nitty-gritties of, of all the guidelines here because it might overwhelm you. But just know that we are following at Nourish here, the American Diabetes Associations and American Heart Association guidelines, specifically targeting around carbohydrates, saturated fat, and sodium. I and the chefs here had many conversations, and the chefs were fighting on how to make it more tasty for you guys. And I tried to fight to keep it within the guidelines, but we have those sort of discussions so we can bring you something that is tasty, but, at the same time, healthy. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is where it gets very simple. You probably are familiar with this, and this is probably the most simple concept to share with you. It's the plate method. You've probably seen this all the time. This is the American Diabetes Association plate method. And, if you take a 9-inch plate, fill half of it with vegetables, a quarter protein, and a quarter carbs, right? Pretty straightforward. But now this is like an American dish, right? So how are you going to be able to adjust it into like our favorite Asian foods? This is the question. So if you go to the next slide, please, you see that, for example, this is a vegetarian Indian meal, and you can follow the same method to have a balanced meal. The reason why it works so well is because it has enough of all the macronutrients to promote, to keep you full, and food is nutrition. It keeps you satiated, right? So if you look at this plate again, 50% veggie, you're gonna have to get tired of hearing me saying this, 25% protein and 25% carbohydrates. And we're gonna there's a lot of questions later on about like white rice versus brown rice versus oatmeals and all of this. And yes, certain kind of grains are better than others, but in general, if you keep your portion to this plate here, you're on the right path, and you don't really have to, sweat the little details so much unless you have something very complex going on with your health. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so Filipino food, yummy, right? We all love adobo. And this is a vegetarian version. We remake it with mushroom because the mushrooms soak in the flavors, right? And then we have a quarter carbs and then a quarter protein, egg, and tofu. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is Vietnamese food, my powerhouse. Because I'm Vietnamese. This is my mom made for me. I'm not a very good cook. So here we have chicken rice. And then the chicken is flavored with chicken broth, so it's even more flavorful. And then some watercress salad, and then some protein, right? Same method, same plate. Everything is consistent. If you can keep it like this, right, then it's pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. Okay, so what about fried rice, like Chinese food, just like all mixed together? How am I going to do it? Well, you can still keep the same concept, right? Before you mix it together, like the cabbage and the beans and the carrots, like 50%, and then the brown rice is 25%, and then the shrimp, the protein here, and the eggs here is 25%, right? So next slide, please. This is Japanese food, right? Same concept. And the added umami is both a vegetable, so it counts as a vegetable, but it also has protein in it, so it also counts as a protein. So this is, again, a very balanced meal. Hopefully, the message we try to convey is that food can be both healthy and delicious, right? I hope you guys are looking at this and say, oh, I can eat that, instead of, I'm so tired, I don't want to eat a cardboard meal, right? So this is the goal. This is why our chefs work very hard, to bring you this. Next slide, please. I won't bore you with the actual nitty-gritty science behind it, but for all of our recipes, we put it through a database, a pretty rigorous database, to check all the numbers, to make sure it follows the ADA and the AHA guidelines before we put it in front of you. So if you are using our recipes, you should rest assured that we already tested them. I think that should be my last slide. And any questions, I'll be happy to take it at the end. Thank you.
I'll just quickly share a video now. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you, Lily. Now that we know the guidelines which we adhere to, it is also important to make sure our recipes are delicious, as they are good for you. That's why we work with Chef Irfan Dama. Chef Dama was chef at Google's Bagel Cafe, but even more, he was integral to Nourish's upcoming book. Take it away, Chef Dama.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. My name is Chef Irfan Dama. Well, actually, my name is Irfan Dama. The chef is the nickname. I would call myself the Nourish's recipe test pilot. I used to be, my target clientele is corporate America. I design lunch programs. I design Indian food programs for companies like Google, and my food has been served at companies like Samsung, Walmart, Netflix, and other places that make Silicon Valley. Can we have the next slide, please? And so what I would like to do, what I would like to tell you in this part of the presentation is to share the story of the recipe testing process that went into making all these recipes. Now, usually when we test recipes, at least in my world, when cooking Indian food, when we test a recipe, we take a recipe, and if it doesn't taste right, the go-to process is very simple. Just deep fry it, add more butter, add more cream, and you're done. That's how you make good, tasty Indian food. We have absolutely no regard for how is it going to affect the people that eat it. It's just got to be tasty. But in this project, this was different because this does not follow the regular guidelines. Next slide, please. In this process, there were two gatekeepers. There was Dr. Minal, there was Lily. And anything that had to be done, you had to go past these gatekeepers. And I did not have the luxury that I usually do with any recipe testing and evaluation process. Here, the process began because these recipes were given by interns, and these were recipes that were handed down from mothers, delicious recipes. But very often the recipes were in the measurements of a teaspoon here, a pinch of this, a couple of peppercorns there. And this had to be changed and evaluated. Then every dish that is in the book was prepared, tested, and then evaluated, but also had to be passed through Lily and passed through Dr. Minal. And this was where there was so much learning for me personally, because until now, I've never thought about the plate method, the 50, the 25, the 25. And now if I had to go and say, well, I would like to saute the green beans, immediately Lily would raise a red flag and say, no, but then that'll change the nutritional values. And it was really something that went back and forth. We went back and forth so hard to make sure that it fit the guidelines. Next slide, please. But now I'm sticking with our plate method, making sure that 50% of the plate is vegetables, 50 is protein and 15 is starch. Well, sorry, 50, 25, 25. The 25 protein and the 25 starch, well, those are really not that hard because these have inherent flavor. We love the taste of rice, even simple plain rice. There's something very joyous and comforting about it. But vegetables, 50% of your plate is vegetables. How do we go ahead and make that tasty? And that was where my job came. Next slide, please. So we had to be veggie focused without giving up the foods that we crave. And how do we make that? How do we make that happen? How do we make vegetables tasty? Well, my first go-to was, well, if we marinate it in salt, well, they'll bring out natural flavors. But that could not be something that we could live with. So then we had to resort to using lemon juice. And lemon juice brings this, it compensates for the flavor, it compensates for that lack of salt and brings out the flavor altogether. The more I did the testing of the recipes, I also realized that vegetables can be delicious when you are looking at the whole process of you are eating the rainbow. This is what makes everything so beautiful in the plate. And after testing this out in the combination, I began to realize I didn't really miss vegetable. I didn't really miss the large, gigantic portions of protein and starch because the vegetables began to taste so good. It takes a little getting adjusted with the taste buds to get used to those flavors. But once that happened, it was such an enlightening process to have a plate that was vegetable focused. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? How do we stick to this traditional flavors and at the same time not lose out and still make it taste like it was something like the original recipe was supposed to taste? And there was a lot of substitution that had to happen. In this situation, when I was testing out the recipe for salmon onigiri, half the rice was taken out and changed with a shredded cauliflower. And the shredded cauliflower mixed in with the rice, it changes the flavor marginally. But everything else, as you can see, there's so many vegetables that came through, really made for the dish to be very tasty. Except there was one problem. When you mix in cauliflower with rice, you don't have the same binding qualities that you need when you are making an onigiri to have your food come together as a ball. So what do you do in a situation like that? Next slide, please. You do what all the Michelin stars do and say it's deconstructed. So now you've got the same flavor. It's deconstructed. You get to see every element of this dish. It is now not in a roll, but it still looks beautiful. It tastes beautiful. And you eat with your eyes. And so when you have a dish that's presented like that in its deconstructed format, you have the taste, you are staying in with the tradition. And that is how you are able to approach food in that manner. Now, instead of what looks like you're eating so much rice, more than half of that is shredded cauliflower. Next slide, please. Technique, and I added technique with adding that professional touch to the recipes. This is where I personally got to flex the chef muscles a little bit in this case. And this is when vegetables can be boring. If you're having a small amount of protein, how do you get the best flavors out of it? And that's when technique comes into play. Using a little bit of char, you don't add any more oil, but you let the vegetables cook a little longer and develop char. because char just gives in so much flavor. These were little tips and tricks that were added to bring out and enhance the flavor. So it becomes exciting. Vegetables are exciting when they are cooked in that manner, when they are lightly poached, when they're lightly steamed. Instead of being boiled to death, they're lightly poached, they're lightly steamed. If there is a little crunch, then it's enhanced with a little bit of salt that we have, and coupled with lemon juice or vinegar. We could go with that, but it brings that acidic touch and makes it more pleasing. And these are some of the tips and tricks that were brought in, and they were vetted out by Dr. Minal and by Lily as well. The next slide, please. And finally, when we did the presentation and the photography, the entire intention of this book was to keep the recipes simple, approachable, and achievable. I took the photographs for the recipe book, and I'll tell you, these are not glamour shots. They don't look like beautiful glamour shots. They are simple shots because they need to look like these could be presented and prepared in your kitchen. And so this is the idea. The goal behind this is not only to make the food delicious, but it is also to get people to cook, to get people to be like, yes, I can make this, and yes, it can be delicious. And this was the process. Thank you all for taking the time on this evening to share this journey with us.
Thank you, Chef Dama. Very insightful. Finally, I'm very excited about our soon-to-be released cookbook, where each recipe has been thoughtfully contributed by our team members, meticulously reviewed by a registered dietitian, Lily, and cross-tested by our chef who you just heard, Chef Dama. Each recipe needed to serve three purposes, as you saw. They had to adhere the American Diabetic and Heart Association guidelines, connect with the Asian community, and be delicious. Now, with every recipe, you'll find a story that describes why this dish is meaningful to us. In addition, the book contains a series of short visual lessons that teach the readers how to count carbohydrates, eat balanced meals, but with ease. We'll put that cookbook link in our website when it's available for you to download for free. Next, I would like to welcome Chef 2, David Fu. Chef 2 was contestant on Top Chef Season 15, and he's Emmy nominated for film Bloodline, which is a film that focuses on his family story, which is who are all dear for us. Here to talk about his passion for healthy eating and Nourish's mission, here is Chef 2. Take it away, Chef 2.
Thank you, Dr. Moharir. Such an honor and blessing to continue to have this partnership and to be part of his talk today. So hello, everyone. My name is David Fu. Per Dr. Moharir, I'm an Emmy-nominated filmmaker. It's called Bloodline. Please watch it on YouTube. I'm a celebrity chef, Top Chef alumnus, cookbook author for 2024, and an entrepreneur. That's what the public sees. But what you don't know is my family was affected by Agent Orange. If I didn't mention it before, I'm first-generation Vietnamese American, which has triggered genetic diseases in both my paternal and maternal families, such as cancer, specifically leukemia, and type 2 diabetes. Nothing means more to me than my family's health. I wanted to know how to take care of my parents and have always done so through food. That is something that I learned from my parents. Instead of saying, I love you, they showed me love through food and nourishment. And in doing so, it nourished my heart, mind, body, and soul. Next slide, please. Our Western society suggests that health and Asian foods are two separate things. I never had access to academic-based data to implement into my creative dishes. Chefs have everything else. We know the name of our cows that we eat, the soil content, that the vegetables that we grow them in, the name of our farmers, A to Z of terroir, sustainable sourcing, and ethical farming. However, chefs lack the knowledge to make sure our food will help our diners live long and healthy lives. Next slide, please. I have become a staunch advocate for Nourish and its mission because it's exactly what I and the Asian community need right now. We no longer need to yield to anglicized recommendations that discourage us from enjoying our beloved foods. Pre-industrial eating styles in Asia largely reflect the meals recommended by Nourish: more wholesome vegetables, fewer types of meat with saturated fats, and minimally processed foods. I want to show others in the culinary community that food is medicine, culture is medicine, and we as chefs are the ones on the front lines of this movement. Next slide, please. Thank you. Because of Nourish, I learned that my goal is to nurture my loved ones well within reach. Excuse me. To me, the word is adjustment. Simply by adjusting, not replacing a recipe, it allows healthy diets to coexist with food customs and indigenous practices as opposed to abolishing them. It blends the art of food and cooking with the science of medicine while being culturally sensitive. Not only do I make Lily, Nourish's dietitian, happy, but I can inspire my industry colleagues and food community to eat healthy and still have their favorite foods reflect their identities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chef Tu.
Mhm.
Over the past 1 year, we have learned a lot. In fact, we are still doing research on our impact of our content, which you will hear more about just in a bit. However, one thing rings true. Letting people celebrate who they are is one of the greatest things you can do for their health and well-being. After years of believing that there is a need to switch to completely different diets to be healthy, we are finally realizing we are healthy. Coming soon, to keep you excited about Nourish, we have several projects coming to a horizon. These include a Facebook group for our Korean community. We are also rolling public tasting events, so you'll definitely want to join our community so you can see our schedules. As I mentioned previously, we are starting a 2-month investigation on how participants engage with the content we have developed over the past 1 year. Anyone above 18 years of age who is pre-diabetic or diabetic can participate in this pilot study. To enroll, please scan the QR code to enter the link in your search bar or email Angela and Kristen, whose emails are below. The study will begin later this fall. Before I end today, I would like to thank each and everyone for taking time on this weekday evening to learn about our Nourish project. I hope you have had so much fun as much as I did just preparing this presentation for all of you. I want all of you to get involved with us. So please join our online community by scanning the QR code or visiting our website written on the screen. I'll keep the screen on for for maybe 30 seconds, so you can at least scan the QR code, and then we'll head up to a Q&A.
Dr. Moharir and chefs Damantu, thank you so much. This was such an inspiring talk. The idea that food is medicine, I think, really resonated with myself, and I'm sure most of the crowd. We grew up listening to the medicinal properties of the Ayurvedic herbs that the people ate from the Indian food traditions, the traditional Chinese medicine stuff, the wonderful things that came out of Japan, Korea, Vietnam. And it's just so gratifying to be able to see all of the science of the nutrition of food, and especially our spices, our flavors, and the deliciousness of our food come together in such a great way. And I can tell you at the end of this, I am very hungry and I can't wait to get to the kitchen. So ladies and gentlemen, you have definitely inspired me. And I'm sure you've inspired so many of our audience to be able to begin to think about the changes that they're going to make for their loved ones. This is a community effort. And I thought we might start, Dr. Moharir, with a question to you. My parents are South Asian, and my mom cooked every day when she would get home from work. My dad helped, and we would spend a couple hours from the time they got home to the time they ate. We sat down to dinner, just smelling all this amazing food, but it was very rice heavy. And so I guess the first question is, and back in the day, rice was wealth. It was a symbol of prosperity. And now we're getting a message that rice may not be as good for us as we thought it used to be. So I know you've been talking about low glycemic index diets and things where we are eating things that don't spike our blood sugar too much. Can you tell us a little bit about whether eating rice is healthy or not? And if not, how should we think about either cutting down on it or modifying it? I know that Chef Dama had talked about adding cauliflower and other things, but I'd love your take on this, and maybe the chefs could weigh in too.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan. Great question. And I'll give my part of the answer, and then Lily can join as well, because this topic has probably we've been discussing this topic the most, including with the chef as well. I feel from my point of view, like most other foods, rice has its time and place. There is no such thing as bad or good food from my point of view. In general, we recommend that you have less than 1 cup of cooked rice per meal, but we also encourage the people to really try brown rice so they can obtain benefits to added vitamins, minerals, and fiber, which is in the brown rice. Also, 1 cup is starting point. Just double check with your healthcare provider to determine how many carbohydrates you should eat. All of us at Nourish really know it's I feel it's so difficult to really reduce the rice intake, the texture, the smell of just the warm rice in the rice cooker. And here is one method my interns and members of our community have tried successfully. Just mix your rice with steamed vegetables so you can retain the volume of the rice you typically eat. So you still can feel the texture. You can even chew your rice. You can even eat the vegetables along with the rice. So that doesn't feel like you're having a small quantity of rice, and that visual part of it is so important when you look at your meal. If you have a tiny bit of rice which is not even seen, you feel like you're not even eating a meal. And I also recommend really eating mindfully. Sit down, really admire your food. I think so this is something which I feel is so much lacking now, as people eat and fast and walk away and not really enjoy the food, but really admire the food on the plate and eat slowly. You know how easy it will be, and so you'll feel so good at that moment when you're really enjoying that meal, especially knowing that you've made a little bit of substitutions which are good for you. And oftentimes, many times we just eat it too quickly and we probably feel full, but we don't know how much rice we have eaten. So my mantra is, you don't need to give up. You can eat your foods, just maybe do a little bit of adjustment as Chef Dama and Chef Tu showed, and you can enjoy your rice as well.
And I loved your comment about eating with your eyes. I think that we all do that.
Exactly.
I'm anxious to hear from Lily and from our chefs.
Thank you.
And also, Lily, I'm hoping that you can also speak to if some rices are better than others. We've heard a lot about some of the low carbohydrate rices, and also about things with basmati rice. And what's the ground truth here?
Well, thank you. As far as it comes with rice, right? It's so funny. If I were to come to my mom and say, Mom, I'm going to give up rice, she'd be like, you're no longer my daughter. You're not Vietnamese. Get out the house, right? I mean, this is a part of who we are. Like, she was a farmer. Like, what are you doing? So I think this is really important to go back to just think about really simple plate method. And if you keep your portion to a quarter of it, I want you to enjoy the thing you love, right? Like if you're going to tell me, Lily, I hate brown rice. I heard fantastic things about it, but I hate it. Tastes like cardboard, tastes like dirt, right? I'm not going to eat it. In that case, I don't want you to force yourself, because, food is an enjoyment. But if you like white rice, you can eat it, but just kind of like portion it to a reasonable amount. And we suggest starting with the plate method, you keep it to that portion, right? And in terms of the science, if you are going to rank the grains, oatmeal is the best. Raw oatmeal, not the instant oats, but raw oatmeal is the best. Best bang for your buck. If you can learn to love oatmeal, you're going to be great. And I'm sure our chefs here can have fabulous ideas on how to make oatmeal dishes, whatever not, right? There's tons of things. If you can learn to love oatmeal, that's going to be really good, because it's about half the amount of carbohydrate and it has more fiber. Okay, so you can eat more oatmeal. Now, in terms of like Japanese rice, which is a short grain rice, basmati rice, which is a long grain, and jasmine rice, which is the medium grain, right? Basmati is a little bit better in terms of less carb, but not much, just very little. So I don't want you to like think, oh, I'm eating, brown rice, I can eat like 4 cups. No. Or like I'm eating basmati rice, I can eat 4 cups. No, it's just as long as you keep it to that portion matters more than what kind of rice it is at the end of the day. And so enjoy what you love, right? It's made for you and it's made by your family for you. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy your meal there. That's it.
And just to clarify, Lily, we're talking about 2 different things, because one is how easily absorbed a carbohydrate is, which is what we mean by glycemic index. And I think that's what you were meaning by some things having a better diabetic profile, like basmati rice. And we're always trying to get our carbohydrates in all of less than 55, from like 100 being glucose. And then you're talking about a second thing, which is glycemic load, which is how much of the thing that you're eating. And so you're suggesting that we keep our carbohydrates, to clarify, to about a half cup to little less than a cup per meal, if possible, and closer to a half cup is better. Is that correct?
That is correct. And thank you for the clarification. That is correct. So control the portion, and this is cooked rice. We're not talking about raw rice, right? So once you cooked it, and a cup is about a small fist. So that's just an easy way to think about it, a very small fist. And yeah, so between half a cup to a cup, depending, how much you exercise and your age and all of that, right? So target within that range. And then, if you're diabetic, then you should test your blood glucose to adjust the insulin and all of that wonderful stuff, right? But that's a range you should target per meal. Yeah.
And I have to emphasize that what you just said is so important, especially for people who have diabetes or pre-diabetes. See how your body is doing. Take the half cup and then check 2 hours later or 1 hour later. See what your blood sugar is doing. Take a little bit more, get some data to be able to back up your own practice. So I know the chefs have some thoughts on this and other topics too. So sorry to monopolize.
I'll jump in at this point when it comes to the talk between brown rice versus white rice. And recently at a project that I was working at, the Nourish concepts followed me along with this journey, where when I looked at all the dishes that I was offering as part of the lunch program, my question was, what whole grains are we offering? What vegetables are we offering? And let's be very honest, the vegetables in Indian cuisine pretty much are cooked to death. It's cooked to death, it's laden with spices, it's usually oily, it's greasy, and that's what we understand of vegetables. So there were 2 things that I added to the menu, which I believe made an impact. One was, let's have a tadka vegetable station. And a tadka vegetable is just basically simply steamed vegetables with a light infusion of oil with the spices. Let the spices take over and add that flavor. And the other thing, in terms of the one thing that I learned from this project, is there is power in substitution. One of the most, we all say rice is our center of plate as an Asian. Rice is something that we love. But we're forgetting something. We're forgetting this iconic comfort food, khichdi. Khichdi is something that I grew up with, and every time I see khichdi, it puts a smile on my face. When I'm feeling a little down, khichdi makes me happy. So what if we swap out the rice and mix it with whole grains? So I came up with a khichdi recipe that contained farro, which contained pearl barley, chana dal, and moong dal chilka. And the idea was to get as much fiber as possible in what normally would be rice and dal. Usually we'd have rice and 2 parts of rice to 1 part of dal in a khichdi. Now all of a sudden it's equal parts of farro, pearl barley, different whole grains that really nourish. And I played around, and Lily, to your and with all the conversations that we had, one time I actually swapped it and I used steel cut oats in the khichdi. And you think about it and go like, how can you have khichdi made with oats? But really, when the results finally come out, khichdi is that one dish that it's comforting, and It's comforting, and it's a little wet, it's a little gooey, and it makes you happy. And these grains will do that. So it's kind of sneaking in grains to give you that health benefit. And these are little changes that you can make, reducing the oil, bringing the spice. When the spice comes out, it changes the flavor. You don't miss the fat as much. These are certain tricks and tips that you can use to make substitutions and still enjoy what you are eating.
Thank you, Chef Dama. Chef Fu?
Yes, I think what I would like to contribute is that it is my mission. I've been empowered and invigorated and inspired by Nourish to get people to fall in love with vegetables again. It is my conviction that vegetables are delicious, not only healthy, not only providing fiber. And I think when we talk about vegetables, there's two things we can consider. Number one is the accessibility of it, meaning land sovereignty. If you look at all the colonized countries in the world, whether it's war or kind of everything in between, there's some sort of pollutant, some sort of chemical war mechanism that has voided people from having land sovereignty to be able to grow vegetables. And I think in those sort of mixes, or excuse me, in that sort of context, growing vegetables and having vegetable accessibility, just as a general statement across the board, makes it a little bit difficult. However, I think we're moving into a new era in terms of a food economy in the world where people are interested in eating vegetables again and reclaiming their land sovereignty and their food sovereignty, so that way they have a brand new relationship with how they eat their diets. When you look at things, when you look at diets that are heavy in meat and heavy in grains, it always traces back to industrialization. So I think that's one context. The second context is that I don't want to demonize rice. I don't want to demonize any type of food ingredients. And anything, too much of anything could be bad for you. So my personal relationship with rice is that I am more enamored with rice products, things that have been, products that are rice-based, where the starches have been rinsed out of them. One of them being rice paper, which will be the lower glycemic index compared to regular rice, or even rice noodles, and putting them in a context of using rice paper and making it into a summer roll. In a summer roll, in terms of ratio, it's easy that's a 75% ratio of vegetables that you're getting, whether it's lettuce, cucumbers, anything, zucchini, root vegetables, carrots, whatever, cabbage, cauliflower, what have you. You can put anything in a summer. In addition to that, the Vietnamese, and Lily, I hope you can back me up on this as well too for credibility, is that we are enamored with rice noodle salads. And in ratio, it's usually about 25% rice noodles. And then the other 50% are these beautiful tropical vegetables that are high in fiber. One of them being banana flower, cabbage, the mung bean sprouts, all the beautiful live herbs that make up the gist of that bowl. I found my inspiration for healthy eating. I worked for a few of the world's top 50 restaurants in the world, fine dining, and they do a beautiful and great job of innovation. But I found innovation in cooking with matriarchs and learning generational wisdom that have survived, recipes that have survived past industrialization, and those were great examples. So I don't think things are lost. I think if we look in the right places and give credit to where it's due, specifically in our mothers and our grandmothers and aunties for innovation and what they've held on to, generational wisdom, word of mouth, I think there's a lot for us to uncover. So.
Well, I can't thank you for all of the shared wisdom tonight, Dr. Moharir, for your wisdom in creating this project and your passion for being able to bring healthy Asian cuisine to all of our dining tables. I'm desperately hungry right now. I gotta go to my kitchen and start cooking. To Lily for your careful curation of all of these beautiful recipes, adhering to best practices and challenging us to do better. To Chef Dama and Chef Fu for really partnering to be able to carry this message to such a broader audience, and for the cookbooks that you're developing and all the work that you're doing. This is the passion of a lifetime. And as you know, my mother always said, which means we grew you all with very long tongues. For all of the Asians who love to eat so much and eat our delicious, healthy food, thank you. I know this is the beginning of a conversation that's going to go on for quite a while. There's so many questions in chat. We will endeavor to answer them and have Dr. Moharir's team do so. I would encourage you also to come to our discussion next month, where we're going to be talking about eye disease for Asians. So this is the beginning of a conversation. I know that all the chefs are very passionate about this. Our faculty, our students, our interns, our dietitians, our entire community, all of you. I can't thank you enough for being part of this conversation today. And hopefully this will be the beginning of a lifelong conversation that we will have at Stanford Care about making health for Asians better everywhere. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our panelists and to you, our audience today.
Thank you, everybody.